My name is Norma Shorty. My Tlingit name is Yeskechan Tukasach. I'm an inland Tlingit from Teslin, Yukon. I'm a curriculum developer and a PhD candidate. And I'm also a Tlingit woman. And so part of the jobs that I do in the Yukon are developing curriculum and teaching at colleges and teaching teachers how to teach about, teach Indigenous children and all of this. So I thought that this session would be participant-based. So it's really about us sharing our knowledge. And what I'd like to do, if I have your permission, is to write down the details that you say so we have something to walk away with, those that have participated here. The reason that I thought that this was so important is because I also sit on the Arctic Council, and with the Arctic Council, it's all about scientists, and scientists engage Indigenous peoples in discussions like traditional knowledge. And so, we started to kind of look at what is Indigenous knowledge, and so you had several topics here as well on the weekend, using traditional knowledge and the use of it by non-Indigenous peoples. And so this whole session is really about Indigenous women or women sitting together and saying what Indigenous knowledge is. And it's not just the women that are going to have an opportunity to speak, but we're going to allow everyone to talk. Because I know that in our traditional way, the women were the ones who were our teachers. And so when we sort of interface with, Western ideas, like schools, like, justice and all of these places, that the idea of our ideas as Indigenous women oftentimes it gets lost. And so what is spit out at the other end is not typically what we meant to begin with. And so that's what this session is about. But I thought I would, before I do that, break into what it is that we're doing. I wanted to share with you a curriculum that was developed by Pearl Keenan, Jimmy Johnson, and Emma Shorty in the Yukon. And this curriculum was for college, and it's a 13-week course. And in this course, the ages of the elders that worked on the project were between 79 and 90. And they didn't want their names mentioned in the curriculum because they were speaking for their people. And so it really is about a curriculum that was developed by Tlingit people and for outsiders when they were coming in to engage in our communities. And so the reason they didn't want their name mentioned is because that's an Indigenous construct. That's the way that Tlingit people do business. So it's clans standing up, and that's who comes forward. It's not the individuals. And so the individual person who comes forward, that's a very Western way of doing things. So that was one of the things that they talked about. Then they started to think about, what is Tlingit methodology? And so they said, this is how we did it a long time ago. They would all talk about it, and then they would correct one another and to make sure it was the right way. So oftentimes what happens when we sit in larger circles with, say, with schools or with government or institutions, we're asked as individuals, what do you think? What is culture? And then what happens is that these agencies or institutions will take our words and make that to be what it is that they think it is. And so it's not necessarily the voices of our nation sometimes that are standing forward. So this is one of the things that, I've noticed in my own work, in all of the things that I've done. So they also, the elders talked about, this is the way, this way of doing things goes back in history. This is called collaboration. So it's elders kind of working together, correcting one another on stories and history, and saying, and methodology, and saying that this is the way it was. And so that's kind of the way it was. So in the curriculum, they also said that, that the elders needed to come into the classroom at least once a month. So they needed to come in and talk to the people that they were working with. So the people that this curriculum is developed for is for social justice people. So it's people who work with our individuals in jails. It's for teachers. It's for nurses, doctors, all of those that come into our small villages. So, and they titled this curriculum, "We Are Talking About Our Way of Life." So this is what they wanted. Now, when I first developed this curriculum, I spent over a year developing the units and the lessons, and ensuring that, it was put together in a very nice package so that, Western teachers could understand it. And so one of the things that the elders did was to say, no, this is not what we wanted. And so, a whole year of work was kind of down the tubes in an afternoon. And that was my work. And so, I could choose to say, I'm sorry, but it's going to go forward. Or I could choose to say, hey, I'm going to get in the learner seat here and I'm going to learn exactly what it is that you're talking about. And so I chose the latter part, which was to sort of say, all right, let's start over. And so I threw it all out. And so this is what they came up with. So the first parts were, the learning outcomes. So typically when you go into a university or a college, the first things that the school wants, in the Yukon anyway, that the school wanted us to do was to, to have our students become aware of contact and colonization. And so what the elders did is they decided that no, that wasn't enough and that didn't go far enough. And so they wanted to sort of say that the students who come into this course are going to acquire knowledge that Yukon First Nation people are honorable, respectful, spiritual, knowledgeable, and intelligent people. So that goes a lot deeper, and it's a lot different than saying you need to be aware of our culture. They are saying to people that we have a way of life, we have a worldview, and this is what it is. And so we needed to sort of define in our own words, what it is that we wanted the world to know about us. And we decided in that room what it was that they were going to learn. It wasn't just that they could go out and pick and choose and maybe take things that were sort of confidential to us or were sacred to us. We decided what was going to go forward. Or they decided. And the other thing that the elders wanted was that the learners would become aware of issues surrounding contact and colonization over Yukon First Nations. So it was looking at government policies, mission schools, disease, the gold rush, and the highway development. So these were all of the things that the elders thought should come forward. And then becoming aware that Yukon First Nations have a worldview that is different than Western worldview. So it was really, the curriculum now starting to look and defining what is Tlingit worldview. And this Tlingit worldview is really set out by women. And so that's what this session is about. And the other is applying culturally sound decision-making frameworks and protocols, and enhance the use of Indigenous elders, community resource people, while recognizing and respecting Indigenous research methodology. So that Indigenous research methodology in our own country is set by our elders. Our elders are the knowledge bearers. They're the ones who sit in the middle of the circle, and we as learners sit on the outside. They're the ones that are setting our dialogue and discourse, and we are the ones who are taking notes. When we have questions, we ask them later. and sometimes our questions aren't appropriate and we're told so. So our elders are very strong, and they've actually become quite used to working, in these Western constructs and really setting, the Tlingit framework and being very strong about that. The other was, in embracing the role that your gender and that your nationality plays, and to examine your power in Western constructs. So, a construct really is to define that word, it really means, the way we think about things, the way the world is set up. So when we think about Western world and how that's set up, there's a right and wrong, there's a black and white. But in Indigenous cultures, sometimes, you will have people talking about things, and you'll have various ways of understanding certain things, and they may not always jive. So sometimes that means that we record everything, because that thread means that somebody else might find the truth in what you're saying. So that might be, a crumb of knowledge for somebody else to pick up when they're searching for their identity. So that was part of it. And when we said that we wanted, the learners to embrace their gender, so it was, being a man or being a woman. So embracing that and thinking about, when you're working with our community, what role does that play? If you are a man and a doctor and having to work with our women, what does that mean? And so it was really, looking to the learner themselves and figuring out how we would work with them. And then we wanted the people to know that they needed to become aware that all human beings are equal. And this was something that the elders felt very, very strongly about, that nobody is above or below anyone. And that was how, at least in Teslin, that's how we view things. And that everybody is treated with respect, no matter who they are. So whether, in our own traditional systems, whether you were Gach or whether you were, on Yadi, that you were treated with equal regard. And that was something that the elders wanted to everyone to know. And that everybody wanted to be treated with respect, no matter who they were, and that respect makes a positive difference in our lives. So these were sort of, the 7 sort of course objectives that we went forward with. And, the ones that were tossed out were actually very Western, and, I took them out of Bloom's taxonomy. I tried to make, the culture fit into this Western framework, and realized as I was doing it that wasn't going to work. So what came from the elders was absolutely incredible. So as we did that, then we took those learning outcomes and we developed units and lessons from them. But the most important things is that the elders had a chance to kind of learn how to work. We learned how to work together. So we learned how to set, education and cultural paradigms. And I learned how to work with elders and how to be a better listener. And as well, that collective knowledge is really what it's all about. It's not about me standing up here saying this is what Indigenous women's knowledge is, because I don't really know what that is. It is the collective knowledge in this room. That is what Indigenous knowledge is. So that's, when we are looking at our own ways of doing things, that's what we wanted to make sure people understood. So, sorry, just give me a couple of seconds here. So one of the things, when we are thinking about choosing people to stand for us, these were what the elders had said about that. So Appendix 1 of this curriculum is how to pick a knowledgeable person. So these are what the Teslin Tlingit elders think a knowledgeable person is. The person you pick should know their language and their culture. And the people in the community know who these people are. So there are rules to follow with regard to our clan crests, our stories, and our land. They're also saying that the people should be elders and not young people. When you pick an elder, ensure that they can truly contribute to the discussion and the dialogue and the situation. And many of our elders have specialized knowledge, and that's how it's always been. So sometimes, you know, when you're sitting in sort of a science room, is the elder that is sitting there, do they have, you know, a strong base in hunting and gathering and all of these things? Or, you know, is it suitable that they're there, or should they be at another table? So some elders have lots of knowledge and oftentimes are overlooked. Knowledgeable elders may segregate themselves away from people. One has to use their head when picking elders. This is very important as they are the spokespeople of our culture. Elders in age. Reverence is almost always given to the eldest elder, but that's in our own culture. Our elders have lived a long time, and this is how our knowledge is passed on. We didn't have books. Because our method to pass on stories is oral, knowledgeable people are truthful, dependable, honorable, and reliable. This concept of honesty is very important in order for our heritage to be truthful, and so our culture can live on. Listen sharply and tell it exactly like it is. Don't add things in and don't take things out. Don't be afraid to research. This is very important as our culture is oral. Many times, research does correlate with oral history. Develop policies on how to select community people. And this is done to avoid claims of nepotism. So the elders looked at some very hard topics and, you know, sort of just said it like it is. And so they wanted to form a community of elders to approve the nominees that are put forward. So there would be an elders board that would approve whoever was being put forward. And for matters that pertain to Yukon First Nations overall, the list has to be approved by First Nation elders in every community. So these were some of the ideas that they had. They have to come to the board willing to give their very best knowledge to the situation and with kindness. You cannot sit back and let other board members carry the load. Each individual board member has a responsibility to the board members to give forth their views and to develop a probation period, an evaluation form, and a process on dealing with incompetent people. So these were, it's a very hard kind of way of looking at things, but in a time when our culture and our languages and our way of life is, coming to a point of extinction, these are some of the things that they felt were really important. So, that was just sort of why I was asked to come forward and to lead a session on Indigenous women's knowledge. And this is participant-based. I didn't intend to stand here and talk for an hour and a half. I have a blank screen here, and so what it is I'd like to pass the microphone around, and with your permission, I'd like to take notes, and whatever we come out with, that is kind of what, what is going to be setting the agenda for us, and or creating future direction for us. So for me, working with the Arctic Council, I've just been nominated and selected to be a social, economic, and culture expert for circumpolar. And I represent the Arctic Athabascan Council, and the Arctic Athabascan Council represents Alaska, Yukon, and Northwest Territories. So when I'm sitting there with those scientists in the circumpolar world, I don't know what it is that you want me to say. So that's what this is about. And I decided that I would share with you the curriculum and some of the outcomes that our elders in the Yukon came forward with. And the way I did the process with them was very much like this. And we just started with a blank page, and we had a title, and they were able to see what I was putting up there. And from that, we sort of, chunked down this 13-week curriculum. And the words that I read out are the words verbatim from the elders. They checked it as I developed it. I read it back to them. If it wasn't right, I was told to change it, and I would, so it was me as in the learner seat and a facilitator. And so, I'm a teacher. I teach at the college, but it's more me being a facilitator of knowledge. And so I'm really hoping that we can have, that kind of a session here. And so this is about, Indigenous women's knowledge and, what is that, or anything that you choose to talk about. And we have, I think, until lunchtime. So hopefully we'll, keep that in mind and maybe take 10 minutes each. So we'll start with Robbie.
Gunalchish tlain, gunalchish achseyi saachi, jadiechat no u. Thank you for listening to my words. Please forgive me for being late. I missed the first part of Norma's presentation, but when I walked in, I was fascinated instantly and listening carefully to every word she chose in her presentation. And even when they were strong words, I had this feeling of ayach awa. It is exactly right like that. Ayach awa. So to reassure you, Norma, with my impression of the Tlingit community on the coast, ayach awa. I couldn't think of one thing that would have been different than she said it. So, gunalchish iyejineyi. Thanks for your work. You've put it on paper, which is nearly impossible to do. I don't have much to say about myself. I'm married into the Tlingit community in Sitka, and my husband is Tluknachadi, and I was put under the eagle's wings, as my father-in-law said it. We want to put you under the eagle's wings, and so his mother, my father-in-law's mother, was named Kuliek. And he wanted me to have that name. When he talked to his uncle, Charlie Joseph, Charlie's sister's name was Kuliek. And so Charlie thought that was a good idea. And they had a memorial party for a clan member, and I had no idea what was going on. I had a baby in a basket, and he slept under the table, and I sat the whole time as an adoptee. I should have been helping. I should have been serving. I should have been helping the clan I was being adopted into. But they said nothing. They didn't tell me what to do. They just said, you sit there. In fact, I didn't know that I was going to get a name. I didn't know I was going to be adopted. I just, like this. Anyway, I remember it clearly. It was fascinating and interesting, and I felt welcomed. I felt good about being there. And it wasn't until decades later that I fully understood what was happening at that time. And I guess it was okay. My father-in-law treated me with such gentleness. He didn't want to scare me off, I think. Or maybe that's traditional Tlingit culture, that you treat people gently and with respect, especially if they don't know what's going on, and you don't hold it against them. So that's just the beginning of my introduction to the Tlingit culture when I was given the name of my father-in-law's mother. Over the years, I began to understand what that meant, in that I was taking her place. In other words, I would be looked on to do things that she would have done. And children or young men, if they knew their culture, would know that if Kuliek was their great-great-grandmother, that they would give me a piece of their harvest in her name. Because I was holding up her name, and I was her in person after she had gone to the spirit to be with the rest of the ancestors. So it's a way of bringing your ancestors into the present day. And this is what I understand is what's so important with our elders, to hand down family names. They gave me a family name, Lechawadayachat. I had no history. I had no place on the tree. They couldn't even find me through the back door or through a relative's relative. And yet they gave me a family name, a precious one. They took a chance on me. And I'll forever be grateful that they trusted me for that. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from, and I certainly don't need 10 minutes to talk about myself. Carol, wahasa. Tlat kagwantan nachat city. How? Okay.
Hello, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, I've been thinking lately, we've come quite a ways with living in the Western world, but there's still two things that bother me. When you step out and you work on an issue, and you do really good, you still don't, I don't know, the better you do, you have to step out there and be brave, is what I mean. And in the end, if you just really start shooting way up there, and then you get right up to the door and they slam it in your face because they've got other plans for things. But you know, there's things that I have to talk about sometime to a big crowd, because I can't understand why, if you have a difference and you're in politics or anything, and then pretty soon you got a big family feud going, you know, I always put those in their place. They're there and we can still be friends, we just have that difference. And another thing is, it's getting so people don't act with respect when they hear something about you. And the next time you see them, even no matter who they are, they believe what they heard. And I learned this from, I knew it all the time, but it really came home one time when we were trying to do a totem thing in Wrangell. And they wanted to put it in my yard because the church didn't, am I doing all right here on the microphone? The church didn't want it back they bought the property next door to mine. And I was on the IRA. Most of the time I was on the board of directors, and I was busy in Wrangell. But anyway, it became a big thing. It turned political. And everybody was cussing at me because how dare Carol, she's not from here. How come she is going to have that totem? It turned out it was Kadashan Sheikh's family celebration totem. And so I'm Kadashan Sheikh's, Nani Ai. And, but I knew people, some of my own, the people that I was right to the IRA, they wouldn't talk to me on the street. And I became the subject of more negative things. And I really, I don't know, I learned a lot from that. But here come this friend of my son, Chris's. He had time off from the mill. He was always at our house. We always had young boys there with my son. And he said, "What's this, Carol, I hear about this totem thing?" And it's downtown, everywhere, the bars and the floats, and you know, wherever you go, and they're talking about you and this totem. I said, "Oh yeah, they don't know where to put the totem. They're building a new beautiful park down there for the Kicksuddy. It's the Sun House area, and somebody doesn't want it there, and what do you call the society, the historical, they wanted it there. So it became quite a tug of war, and I was asked, do you want that totem in your yard? I said, oh, if it has nowhere else. And I was right in the middle again. That's my part in life. Somebody didn't like what I was doing, and I couldn't please everybody, and that was my answer. But there's another thing. He asked me about that. That's good. It was settled with him. That's what I'd appreciate people to start doing, is coming to the other side. Never taking sides, and come to you and ask, what's this I hear? A real friendly. You're their friend. You're the other person's friend. It would be a wonderful feeling, because there's a lot of times now, even now, I'll see a person and they'll act really cold towards me, and I always write people off. I don't grieve when they act like that. But I one time I was sitting with Isabella Brady 2 times, and this person came up and talked to her, and then he walked away. Well, she was a little bit surprised, and then it happened again, and she finally said, do you know Carol Brady? Yes, I know Carol Brady. But what does he know about me? I never found out, but why didn't, he's a big leader. He should have come to me and said, is this true? A friendly way, nice and warm, like that young man did to me, You learn from the young sometimes, He was such a gentleman. So I really would like to see all things set aside, and you come and talk to somebody about this issue that you heard, and leave it in that spot and still be friendly. If you have differences in politics, please have a difference, but be friendly. I learned that from my friend, Edith Mayasato Stevens. She lived right next door to me, and we'd have differences, but next time she saw me, she'd always be so smile at me pleasantly. We just kept on being friends. Same with Wilma Stokes. She was my friend at school, one of the best friends I had. And but after you get politics in your life, you really have to understand each other. A lot of things are really good if you understand. You try to understand them, where they're coming from, and respect them, and share with somebody if you don't quite agree, because that's respectful too. Yes, I'm so glad I could say this, because it needs to be things need to be put their place. We had so much trouble over bringing the Shakes flotilla killer whale. My son was, Nora, her poem last night was so beautiful. That was my son, John Feller. They put the robe on him, and her poem was about that. And I have pictures of him in there, but he wasn't going to try to be the chief. I mean, you have to stand in your own place, and respect others. And he kept on, everybody all over the place were saying, John Feller is trying to be the Shakes chief. And no, he wasn't. He was the caretaker. He was the caretaker of the blanket. All this I didn't know much about. I went to Wrangell when I was 15, and I heard more about my background in Wrangell than I ever heard from my mother. She was from there, Elizabeth Cadishan James. And people kept telling me about my grandfather, John Kadishan, who was a guide for John Muir, and orator, and people talked about him. I never heard anything about him in Sitka, from my mother even. She was always conscious because there was a war way back when, and people still kind of thought about that. So, yes, you suffer a lot if people want to act funny to you from something they heard. Somebody they heard that isn't very good. So, I guess you could talk to Wilma Stokes. I've known her ever since I was in school, and she'll tell you. You can tell Carol something. It never goes any further. Yeah, because I treat my family like that. I treat them all the same. And I said, I don't encourage talking against one person from one of my children, because I'll tell them, I don't want you to feel that I'm going to bite you in the back when I'm with my other child. Feel comfortable. Just tell me what you feel bad about, but we don't need to take it too serious. We still have to live together. That's all I have to say, and thank you.
Goodness, sheesh. This is Carol Feller Brady, one of the beautiful, gentle people in the world. I'm sorry that you were ever hurt. That's not good.
I love it, but I'm not perfect, you know.
That's true. Okay.
Thank you.
Goodness, sheesh. One proverb that comes to mind that I've heard elders say is that it seems like the Tlingit culture or the Tlingit people today are like a bucket of crabs. You have a bucket of crabs, and each one pulls the other one down so that they can climb higher. They said it seems like that. And I think that's not traditional. I think the more traditional way is to talk about your differences, like you pointed out. And you spoke that wise advice at a perfect time in my life. And I really appreciate hearing them and reconfirming and refocusing respect. And go and talk to somebody if you have differences with them.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm having trouble with this computer, so it's just telling me, don't do this. So I'm going to focus on what you're saying and not try and write it down. Yeah, so basically, I'm going to hand the microphone on, and I'd like to invite my mother to talk about Indigenous women's knowledge, and just from her perspective, why a session like this might be important. Hold on. Let me talk about what you were telling me this morning about what you needed to learn.
Why we need to?
Well, just you were telling me about mission school and all that, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really know where to start, but I was talking this morning to my daughter, and I read part of this that she had to, the presentation she had to give this morning. What I learned from my grandmother is that we are born with the knowledge of our traditional ways. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was residential school. I was taken from my mother when I was only 4. I spoke fluent Tlingit when I was 4 years old. But it was taken from me because I was never allowed to speak my language at the mission school. And when I first got to the mission school, that's the only language I could speak was Tlingit. And I was never allowed, I was forbidden to do that. And if I spoke my language or even said one word, I was slapped around and that. I seem to, I quit speaking, but I was never taught proper English. I just had to learn from the my older cousin who was there. She taught me how to speak English, and so I spoke with broken English all my life. Anyway, when I got home, all I could speak was the English language. I couldn't understand what my grandmother was telling me or saying to me in Tlingit. And she sat me down and said to me, you know, you didn't forget your language. You didn't forget how to speak Tlingit. And what you said to me about getting slapped around about speaking your language, you hid your language away. You hid it so deep down that you think that you lost it. But you hid it away so deeply, she said, that you have to listen to all of us when we talk. All we're going to speak to you is our language, Tlingit language. So I learned how to speak my language again. And she said, don't ever forget who you are. You are a Tlingit child. Don't ever forget. She said, look at your skin. It's brown. Don't ever forget that you are Tlingit. And don't ever forget that, not to be proud of who you are. Because they made me ashamed of being a First Nations person, she said, don't ever forget that you are Tlingit. And I remembered that during all the lifetime that I had in the school, in the residential school. I never did forget who I was. I learned who I was. I never taught my children how to speak my language, Tlingit, because I married Northern Tashoni, and he spoke Northern Tashoni. And I started teaching my children Tlingit, and my husband started teaching them Tashoni, so they were all mixed up. So I came here, what year was that, 2000, to go to university to learn my language. And I did speak really well. And my teacher said that I spoke. I'm a fluent speaker. And that gave me courage. And we're talking about the knowledge and of the First Nations. Indigenous woman's knowledge and and traditional ways. I'm kind of lost here. I'll think of what, and I'll speak again. Okay?
My mother's story is, in fact, the basis of my dissertation. I'm a PhD candidate, and this story that my mom has of broken culture and, a broken way back to a way of life. Because one of the things that I found is that when we lose our identity, we lose a lot more than our identity. We lose our ability to succeed. And, that was one thing that is really impressed upon me. So a lot of our students who don't know who they are, they struggle. They struggle in the Western world, and they struggle in their cultural world. And I can't say that I'm saying this because it hasn't happened to me. It happened to me. My dissertation journey and understanding my mother's story has really assisted me in knowing, and being able to articulate what it is that we need to know as Indigenous women. And knowing who we are, knowing our languages, knowing our culture, these things are what gives us strength and what has given me strength. And, I have to say that when I first started out on my journey, I didn't know how to cut fish. I didn't know how to dry medicines. I didn't know all of these things. But, with the assistance of wonderful women like Percy Coons and her husband Ed, gentle teachers like that helping me and understanding me and embracing, this story. Because when I first started talking about this, I really couldn't express anything because of the immense grief that I felt inside of me, this feeling of being lost and not knowing where I belonged. But now it is quite different, and I've gone through a lot, and I feel I've really matured. And, so this is what this is to, being able to sit and to talk together about, what it is that's inside of us and sharing our knowledge. So, the knowledge that my mother shared is, what stopped her from kind of moving forward. But that she was raised in her culture at least till the age of 4. So that gave her a very strong foundation. And so I want to thank my mom for everything she's done for me. Gunachchish, Mama. Somebody else? Yeah. So we'll get the elders to speak first.
Gunachchish, Norma. You've been talking about the children. I used to do the sales at Gold Medal. That's when I was a beader. I used to bead all the time until Della taught me how to weave, and now I hardly bead. But there was a young boy, and you got to see him last night as a dancer. He was 10 years old. And rather than go into the gym and watch the ball game, he'd come and he'd sit and he'd watch me bead. And his uncle would tease him, "You're supposed to be here to watch a ball game." I said, "Leave him alone." So I taught him how to bead, and he loved it. I taught him how to bead, and he made his grandma things. He beaded his own regalia. He was doing really great. I'd encourage him as much as I could. And the secret is not to talk down to them. Talk to them just like you're talking to your elders. And you'll see what a difference it makes. You don't talk down to them, you talk like you're talking to an elder. And he grew up and he became a manager at Fred Meyer's. And he was in Andy's dance group last night. And he was a song caller. And I was so proud of him. He came over by me after they were done. I said, "Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. You did so good." So I think if you mentor the children like Dale and I do, they come to us. If you see us out there, they're always by us. And we encourage them as much as we can. And it works. It works. I have 2 young guys now that are coming around, and the other one is becoming a song caller. They're just 17, and if you encourage them and try to inspire them as much as you can, they can go a long way. They can. I truly believe it, and I'm just proud of those young guys. Thank you for listening to me. You can't get it.
Hajaria. Kasawayu hatua sauk. Yehna hatsati. Zakwediaria yahat. Dekina Shawat. My mother is Haida and my father is Tlingit. So when they were growing up, they were sent to Sheldon Jackson College, or Sheldon Jackson School, I guess. And they weren't allowed to speak their language. So my father told us a story. He said, so they'd jump off the ground and speak Tlingit real fast and then hit the ground again. But that's how they spoke their language. They'd get mad and they'd jump up off the ground and they'd speak their language and then they'd hit the ground and stop again. So they had a way of taking care of that problem of not speaking their language on the grounds. So they jump up off the ground and speak Tlingit. But I think that in their way, in our way of life is not it hasn't stopped. We're still living our life, our way of life. We're still Tlingit, Haida, Shimshan peoples, Indigenous peoples. And it's a wonderful feeling to have had my parents and my grandparents in my life. I'm the second generation to know my grandmother. Well, I should start. I know my mother and my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, all my aunts, all my uncles, all my cousins, all my sisters and brothers, because I didn't go to boarding school. I was born and raised in our little village. And to grow up with family and to grow up living the way we do, living off the land, listening to our elders' stories, it was it is beautiful. I still hear the stories. I still see my mother. I still see my father. I still see my grandparents. It's a way of life. I asked my father, am I less of a Tlingit or Haida because I don't speak my language? And he said, no. You can't be less of Tlingit. You can't be less of Haida. You are. You are living your language. The language is not living you. The language is words. Our way of life is our language. So that lifted me up that morning, or that evening we had dinner with elders. We live our language. Now we're learning the words. So Hawagunash Chish for being here and taking care of us, because this is a deep subject. and I appreciate your bringing it to us. The type of time and place is where we live today. This is our life, and this is important times for us, and we bring our children with us. Most of them do not go to boarding school anymore. So what do? Like Percy said, we speak to them because they are our family. We speak with them to be listeners, and we love humor. We're always joking around with them because in our little school, our big schools here in Juneau, I worked in there for 10 years as a cultural educator, and there's very few of them, and they're invisible. They're invisible as Tlingit people in their own little land here. So we try to back them up wherever we see them, whatever we do, we have them come to us. And we just love them and help them stand up to be who they are by sharing what we do know and talking to them about being who they are. So, Hawa Gunash Chish for bringing this to us. Looking around for Debbie. She's here.
I'm not an elder yet, though. But my mother would kill me if I called on her first. I actually wanted to come to this just to find out how we can better find our voices as women, not just so that we can talk to be talking, but so that we can share our experiences better. And since coming to Juneau almost 8 years ago, one of the best ways that I have, forums that I've been involved with, is every Saturday going to Auntie's house and sewing. And I feel sad for some of the communities that don't have that, or folks that don't have a gathering of it's mostly women, although there's some men too. And we bring our projects, our weaving, our sewing, our baskets, but sometimes we just go and don't do anything. And I missed sewing one day, and I said, so did everybody get together? And they did, and they laughed, and I said, why are you laughing? And they said, well, because we got together last Saturday, and we never took out our projects. For like an hour and a half, all they did was talk, and never took out their projects. And that was the whole reason for coming together, was to work on your sewing. But really, that's not the reason. The reason for coming together is to share experiences and to learn from each other. I've had the opportunity over the last several years to learn a lot of different art forms and learn a lot of things, but each and every project that I work on changes from the concept of the project changes from what I envisioned when I first started it, because I show it to people. I show it to those who I'm working with or who I just meet passing in the hallway, and they offer me a suggestion of how I could make it better. I made a robe last year, and it's not done, even though it's already been danced and it's been used. It's constantly changing. And Fausto, my good friend Fausto, I showed it to him yesterday, and he says, there's something missing. There's something missing. And so today I'm going to put some ermine on it because that will fill in those holes. And Della did the same thing. She says there's something missing from the background. So everybody offers. And so one thing I guess that my biggest lesson in the last couple of years is to never think that you know so much that you can't learn anymore. And I just said that to somebody this morning when I realized, and I don't want to badmouth or personally attack anybody, so I'm not going to say any names because that's not the reason for my point. But there is lots of folks who are not here at this gathering. There's lots of our community leaders who are not here. And the words came out of my mouth before I even realized what I was saying when I said, those who are not here think that they know so much that they have nothing more to learn. And that's sad, because we always have something to learn from each other, always.
Gynnes chish llygchwyo chydw saw iech na hydsyti. My Tlingit name is Among the Berries. I'm Raven Moiety. And I too work in the school district at one point in time. And I just had a moment here with one of our students who's now an adult. And he is battling the outside demons, is what he called them. I'm having struggles, is what he said to me. I want to be a leader. I want to learn my culture. And I told him, you're in the right place. You're making the right steps right now. I said, I can only give you the perspective of a Tlingit because you are Haida. You're a double-fin killer whale. And you're a young man. But I can tell you, you are on the right path. Find yourself some elders that you can put yourself under their wing. Let them know that you want to learn and that you want to be that person to help lead the next generation. And they will be there to help support you. And in regards to the community, I believe that we have to have more community gatherings. Not only the Auntie's house, I think the Auntie's house is an awesome beginning, but it has to be more. It can't just be a sewing class. It has to be a healing class. A place for our children can feel welcomed and to be supported by the aunties and the uncles the way it was a long time ago. But sometimes when they come into this place, they are told, be quiet. You're making too much noise. Sit down. These aren't comforting words. And so we have to find a way to help our children find that center of being with us. And we, as elders, need to have patience with them and help guide them in a loving way. In a loving way. I went to this clan conference over in Hoona, and Wayne Howell gave a remark about John Muir when he came into Glacier Bay. And he quoted John Muir by saying, if the Christians could see how the Tlingits treat their children, not one time while I was in this village was a child ever reprimanded in public. He was never, none of these children were ever spanked. They were loved. So the way that we discipline our children, you know, I think back on these legends and these stories and the elders when they share their stories. They don't tell us, you need to do it this way. They actually share a story with us. And then they place it in our hands to make the right choice. And that youth rises to the occasion and makes that right choice. And that was done by love. And I think that's how we have to start talking to our children, because they've already been taught the Western way of discipline. You're not doing it right. You're not saying it right. Instead, oh, you just said this. You need a little more pinch in the X, you know, and to love them for their trying and not to use harsh words on them, because they get enough of that out there in the world. We all do. Just that some of us got thicker skin than others. And so, I'm going to Chish for allowing me to speak. Who does the mic go to next?
Thank you so much for talking about these young children. I know for years that when I was in Wrangell, that we should have an extra teacher there besides the one at Johnson O'Malley, because a lot of these children are brought in very tired and very hungry. Not a lot of them, but a few of them. They start acting out, and I always felt they should be nurtured to stay right in the group and not punishing them and sending them over here, away from the group, because they are very tired and very frightened, and they need to be nurtured, and they should have, this is asking a lot, a Tlingit speak teacher with them, because this is when you really absorb everything you hear and everything this is the years from 1 to 10. I have it in my book. And my mother was an interpreter, like you couldn't believe. Walter Sobolev always talked about her, how well she was an interpreter. And she chose to go Western, but she still interpreted for the minister and the nurses when they went down into the village. Then many people didn't know how to speak English. Well, you know, you hear and you. From the time you're little, you start respecting someone, and you absorb somebody real beautiful. They bake beautiful. They do beautiful things. I grew up around Sheldon Jackson School, and we used to play up there all the time. And we saw a lot of beauty. The campus was beautiful. The people and the students were beautiful. We were just little. This is when you absorb a lot by just seeing these people. On Walter Sobolev's 100th birthday, they interviewed him about, on the radio. I loved it. They said, whatever made you decide to be a minister? And he says, well, I saw it was this school. I saw a lot of beauty. And I saw all these people. He was talking probably about the faculty up at Sheldon Jackson, because he always walked around and let us play and never bothered us either. Never told us to leave. We were swinging up there and rolling down the hill. But you know, I thought, oh my gosh, that's just the way I feel. He said, that was the reason I decided I wanted to have that kind of life. And so I decided I would be a minister. I really missed him after he died, because I knew him ever since I was a little girl in Sitka. I have a picture of him in a band there in 1929. And oh man, was he tall. My dad was in that marching band, and in that write-up, I think it's the Sitka Verstovian. Yeah, that's what it was, but it wasn't all A and B that time. They had a beautiful band. So I really like what I grew up knowing and loving, and I really do feel strongly that we should have a Tlingit teacher working with Johnson O'Malley, and keeping these children right in the same group as the rest. Help them when they're tired, talk to them like a grown-up, and because later on they won't think, I think I could skip school today, they wouldn't miss me, because they know way back when they were bad, they were sent away, or so the other children, it has to be tricky because the other children can't feel like they're giving more attention to somebody else. I worked at a school for 14 years. You couldn't favor any children. But in a way, it was very good because they're smart. They catch on and they start respecting you because you're treating them all the same. And I do like to see people talking about young children, and because I had a cousin that lived with grandma, and she was really old, Grandma Yandiske. She spoke nothing but Tlingit. And yet Bobby grew up speaking Tlingit, and he was a little guy, and he didn't look like an Indian. And he was so cute to hear him speaking Tlingit with Grandma. And so I know that at that young age, I know a lot of people are going in. What are these people that their early childhood development? I see more of them coming in. It's really wonderful to know. I talk too much here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just briefly, I'm thinking of the words of one of our elders from home, Auntie Pearl Keenan. One of the things she wanted to, she couldn't come, but one of the things she wanted me to express here at this session was the idea that we are losing our culture. We as Tlingit people are losing our culture and our old ways. And that was what she hoped we would kind of, decide and talk about maybe ways and methods that we could bring that culture back. And, so far, the information that's come forward, yes, through our children. That was how they took the culture from us, was through our children. And this is how we are going to gain it back.
I've just been in Juneau for a year, and what I have learned these past 3 days, it has been so moving. What you have shared is so beautiful, and I can't begin to thank you for what you've done in telling us from the heart. In defense of the people who aren't here, I'm guessing maybe it's not because they feel they know so much. We all have constraints of money and time, and the last 2 days were work days, and I just feel so privileged I was able to come. But I'm just wondering if you see people who didn't come, just maybe ask them why, rather than make assumptions. And you're talking about native gentleness, and I think that's maybe part of it, and not the judgment that I'm from a very judgmental family, and so I hate to put that on them. So I just want to thank you all.
Okay, I'm going to pass it to some Teslin elders. No.
I've got nothing to say.
How to save our culture.
It's like coming into a movie halfway through. You're not really sure. Kia de yu chat du sok. Kokiton Shaw, Ayachat. Daislin Kwan, Ayachat. My name is Annie Johnston, and I come from Teslin, Yukon. That's in Canada. We have I don't like to call it a battle, but we are also working our language and our culture. Some young men said in the main session today that really got me and my sister here, my Yanyeri sister here, talking. And he said something like, 50 years ago, he said, when I was a young man, these were the things that we wanted to do with the language. And I thought, oh my Lord, I'm up there too, and that's how many years ago when Madeline started teaching in the schools. Auntie Virginia before her, like that was way back in the early 70s, late 80s, and I'm thinking here we are 2013. So I told Madeline, when we go back home, we have a job. We got to review and see what were our dreams 50 years ago with the language. What were our dreams 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago? Did we do those things? Did we fulfill those dreams? I know we came far, but we don't really know. So someone suggested there that maybe we should do a time capsule. We won't be here to see it, but our grandchildren, great-grandchildren will see it. And hopefully then thing get this even stronger. Thing get ani. Our connections are strong. Each time I come over here, I keep saying, gee, I can't see that border no more. It's very blurred. It's the governments that did that. Our ancestors. My father comes from this country, Douglas Island. Madeline's father was born here in Juneau. Kamasa, how come they moved inland? Some of the stories we hear inland was because of how the U.S. government treated our people over here after the Russians sold it to the U.S. For their own survival and their own living, they moved inland. There were stories of totem poles being burned, blankets being burned. How sad it must have been for them to come that far. Come to our country. Come and see us, come and visit us. We have 3 inland Tlingit communities. Teslin, Atlan, Carcross, Tagish. When you come to our lands and you look at our water, I love my country so much. I love my Teslin, my big lake, my mountains, my fish, my berries, my moose, everything. But come and see us and take a look at our lakes and you'll understand why our people chose Teslin, Atlan, and Carcross. Our lake is the longest one in the Yukon, 195 miles long. But it isn't the largest in the Yukon because part of it goes into BC. But you'll understand when you come, especially when you come to the headwaters of where Johnstown is and you look at it, it's almost like coming into the ocean. And I think, oh, how much our grandfathers must have missed home when they looked at the big water and thought about Juneau, thought about Alaska. Yet, they stayed because they wanted to survive. And we do have a lot of things going, and people look at us and say, oh, you have so much. We always think that the people, Eilka people, we always feel like you guys got more than we do. And you got your songs, your dances, and then we look at, well, we got songs and dances too. But this is how they do it up there. And it's always nice to see people coming from Eilka. Della, she come in and she shared with us. With her, this is what we learned to do. We lost that. Our grandmothers used to weave with spruce bark, spruce root. We're trying to relearn that now. When Della came, she doesn't know what she did. She opened a door for us. I never believed I could do stuff like this. I never believed I could sew beads and stuff, but actually weaving, when I saw people wearing the hats, oh my Lord. And now we can do it. Gunuch Chish Della for coming. And Percy came. They taught us all the weaving, taught us songs. It was so good to see our people there. And their family. Their family, they're our family. Not strangers coming in. This is what our people here know. And hopefully they learn something from us too. Gunuch Chish. I tell you guys, come and see our country. Come and see what we do up there. Gunuch Chish.
Thank you. I knew you would change your mind.
My name is Madeline Jackson. I belong to the Wolf Clan. What I gotta say is, in the past 15 years, we've been fighting the government on the US for salmon in our community. We haven't fished in the lake for 15 years. We had to get the fish flying in from Taku, salmon, because salmon is really traditional for us for the winter, and we had to buy it. It's not cheap. Some of us are on old age pension of $1,000 a month from the government. All of that we have to pay electricity, everything, wood, what we need. And out of that we have to put some money aside to buy salmon for our children and grandchildren. And we've been to Anchorage last year, my son Dwayne and I, and we talk. We tell them we're not doing this for ourselves, we're doing it for our grandchildren and their children's children and the young generation coming behind us. Then there's a reason why we want salmon to multiply. It's because we want to teach the young generation, the group of women, when they become pregnant, that a certain part they can't cut on that salmon. We want to teach that, but we can't because we can't set net. We put that on ourselves. We don't want to set net because we want to fish to come back to the Yukon so the young generation can see what we mean. And it is from July on, it is really exciting because people set net, get salmon. They make big potlatch. Everybody come and eat and take what they need. They don't take all the salmon that comes through there. They take what they need for each family and leave the rest so they can multiply. And now we have to sacrifice ourselves so that salmon can multiply. And the government don't hear us on this side. We talk blue in the face to shut the salmon down for at least 2 cycles. I'm proud to say that Tuslin went through 2 cycles, and that's 15 years without setting net. There's a lot of people in Tuslin set net, but not now. Even wintertime, they just hold their net out of the water. Just 3 or 4 of us set net, and what fish we get, we divide it up with the people in the community. My fish go from Fairbanks right down to Edmonton, and people want fish. I don't sell my food. I don't believe in selling food. I give it. What they give me back, sometimes they give me sugar, coffee, tea, just exchange. And I told my children, that's the way you have to do it. Our ancestors did that. So we've got to respect the food, we've got to respect the land, respect the water, because they keep us alive. And I told the people in Anchorage, you sit back and think, why do you think down south is so much flood, earthquake, tornadoes? Because Mother Earth is fighting back. We're not taking care of Mother Earth like the way our ancestors did. Until such time as everybody open their eyes and see, they're going to start taking care of Mother Earth, and then she's going to be kind like the way she was kind to our ancestors. I thought I'd just bring that up to Colonel Cheese for listening to me.
You wanted the mic.
Kaistan my English name is Marie Olson, and I was interested in Norma's title, Indigenous Women's Knowledge. That means all the women, whatever age we happen to be. And I've visited quite a few other Indigenous women on a worldwide basis, not only in Alaska, but in the state of Washington, because that's where I graduated from high school. But then I went to school again in the state of California and found out that there are a lot of local Indigenous women in California, and they're all saying the same things, complaints about our food. I lived in Hawaii for almost a year. I've been back there to enjoy the warm weather. And then I went to Australia at one time on an education convention, and again the women are saying the same thing. They're saying the same thing, the local Indigenous women. In Australia, I wanted to get real close to the Aborigines. They're very shy. There were two women sitting, and I sat right by them, and they moved one seat away from me. That really disappointed me, but it didn't stop me from making further advances with Aborigines. That's in Australia. The next education committee conference that I went to was in New Zealand, and the New Zealand women are saying the same thing. They are saying the same thing about their local foods. Some of it is disappearing. They have streams where they have long eel-like fish that there was a time one of the women said when she could walk across stepping on the eels in their local rivers, and now they have to go at certain times to get their eels from their river. And that's like us up here. Our salmon is highly regulated, maybe with biologists that really don't understand when the salmon is running. In our culture, we fished for the salmon when they were running, and they all ran at different times. when I first came back home, 1974 was when they had a lot of herring eggs in Auk Bay. 1974, they fished out 600,000 pounds of herring. Lo and behold, and that's in the paper. So if you would like to do research, you can find it in the Empire in the headlines. 1976, there were no herring in Auk Bay. They did the same thing up in Port Frederick, where Hoonah is. Now, Hoonah can really complain about that because it's been years since they haven't had any herring eggs. But you know what? They're coming back. Slowly, they're coming back with the natives not taking any of the herring eggs in Port Frederick. They're taking care of it. And we have to do the same thing with our salmon, our deer, mountain goat, mountain sheep. When I was a kid, I could look up at Mount Juno and see a lot of white spots up there. Those were mountain sheep. And a few years ago, they took some and planted them there. 3 years later, there was a family of mountain goats there. Well, I lived in Japan, and I've been back there maybe 6 times. The women, my area of study was the women and what work they did. They did a lot of the men's work, what we call men's work here. The women were doing it. But they were also teaching their old culture. And I was privileged to sit in on some of the Japanese women's way of doing things. They preserved their culture. Some of them became special teachers. And I think almost all of us here could become special teachers of our culture. If it isn't the food, it's the language. And our history. There is so much written about us. In reviewing some of the books that have been written about us, that it's very sad what they have written about us, because they're looking at us through their Western eyes. They're not looking at us as humans. They're looking at us through their Western eyes, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think we could do the same thing. I'm looking at the university students conducting their own research. And I find that very exciting, because the Native Studies on campus is producing students that are moving in to the school system as teachers, not only of the culture but of the language. They started with the language, naturally went into the history of the Tlingit people here. It was around 1983 that I went around the periphery of the United States visiting Native colleges. And at that time, I became sold on Alaska Native College. Maybe I'm beginning to change my mind now, because we can't really just zero in on one culture in the entire world. And I see the study of women, including all of the different cultures in the world. That way we can share our knowledge. And there is a lot of knowledge among the women in taking care of their children, educating their children. I'll get off my soapbox. I really enjoy the studies of women.
Thank you, Marie. Okay, so it's lunchtime. We have to wrap up, and so if there's any burning desires, and I am going to, Percy is going to end our session with a beautiful song, but first I'll pass it here.
Thank you, Norma. My English name is Linda Wynn. My two Tlingit name is Kanatina Kahawahach. I'm Daklawadi from Kikushihit and Klakwan. I enjoy this topic about Indigenous knowledge or Indigenous women's knowledge. I have a master's degree in library information science, and during my studies I try to make that connection of Indigenous knowledge. And you're correct about how the elders possess the knowledge about our people and about our culture. And I had done, my undergrad study is social work, and I had done an independent study about the comparison and contrast of our kuich and Sundance, which is down, in the lower 48. And not so much of the actual ceremony, but the behind the scenes were women. And I was really amazed how similar us Indigenous women are, because they possess the knowledge of how we are related to each other, how important that is. It has taken me many years to finally understand this. I was not born and raised here in Alaska. As my husband would say, I was born and raised in Bellevue, Washington. I'm a yuppie Indian. But I've lived here for 10 years now, and it's been such a healing experience for me. I can honestly say I know who I am today, even though I'm 62. And I looked at my husband, I said, am I an elder? Is that a chronological thing? And then Della helped me to have some closure when she said that language doesn't, that's been a struggle for me because I don't speak Tlingit. And when I was growing up, I've been told that I'm not Tlingit because I didn't know the language. And yet, on my father's side, who's white and he's German, I didn't speak English very well, so I wasn't a white person either. So it was a real struggle in my teenage years. Am I this? Am I that? But when I went through my social work school, I finally decided I'm both. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think another struggle that we have for Indigenous women is respecting ourselves. There's a lot of the domestic violence that's going on, and some of our young girls who are lost becoming pregnant. And we need to help these women to gain respect to themselves again, and it's through our culture and what it is to be a woman. There's nothing wrong. If it wasn't for us giving birth, if it wasn't for us knowing our lineage and everything, we wouldn't be here today. I believe that. And I know you would like me to go for my PhD, but I don't know. But I would rather help. I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning. However, it's been a wonderful journey to finding to be home. Even though I was born and raised in Bellevue, I've always regarded here home. when my dad drove the family from Washington to come to Klukwan when I was 10. We got out of the car, and I knew my Uncle Ed, and he comes out of the house and everything, and I asked him, Uncle, where are the Indians? He looks down at me and he says, you are one. Really? Because I never knew. Mom never shared it. It was shamed. And so when one of the other elder ladies, I think it was your mom, saying that when she went to school and she was told not to speak Tlingit, my mom spoke Tlingit to me when I was young. And when I started school down there in Bellevue, I had a hard time learning English until one of the teachers called her and told her to stop speaking Tlingit. Maybe it's still in my noodle, I don't know, but it's given me courage after today that, okay, I've been here for 10 years, what have I done? I've always wanted to learn Tlingit, and here it's here. So I need to embrace that and do the best I can to learn the language, and then help my grandchildren who are in need of support and everything. And I appreciate what you had said about our children. I have a dear grandson that's flunking out of school. And I'll pass the message on to my son, who was raised white, if you will, that he needs to nurture him rather than punishing him. So thank you for that. I've learned an awful lot. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me. I'm going to cheese, and thank you, Norma.
Okay, thank you. Hold on. Scott, if we could just sort of, I hate to end the session, because it always seems that once we get going, it's time to end.
Thank you, Norma. I'm John Wynn Yahekwa. I just want to make an observation. I was adopted into Tlingit culture through my wife's aunt, Ruth Casco, about 18 years ago from Klukwan. And what I've learned is that the women are the keepers of the knowledge. And the women are respected for having that knowledge, but they're not always accepted when they take a leadership role for having that knowledge. And I see that as a conundrum that hopefully people can get over that.
I don't want to get shocked. Will you stand with me and let's sing How Great Thou Art? It's a good way to end our beautiful session. I'm going to cheese Norma for this opportunity. We thank you very much. Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Achan kawach sati, tles wasa achyakedat v'nei, yatlingedon yitlein yitliech, chut kayana ho Gatin kageit tu acht laat sini ja antlein tuch duetin at kashech yakwahe ach kane khidiki an kau Tricodiatricity, at geschechach yakwahe aguach ganechidiki an kau. Tricodiatricity, tricodiatricity. Praise God.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your knowledge. And I'm sorry for the voices that we weren't able to hear, but we will have more sessions. And hopefully in the evaluation, you will ask for more time for women's sessions. Good night.